Go ahead.
order. And then I'm going to let Tina do the introductions because she knows who you are out there.
All right, I just want to go through and do introductions like you were doing a sign-in sheet for the meeting. And for those visitors that are here, if you are interested in speaking during our visitor comment section, let me know and I will mark you down and give you your opportunity to speak during that part of the agenda. So why don't we start with the managers? Marge, why don't you go first?
Marge Ebensteiner.
And Cliff?
Cliff Eichinger.
And Larry? Larry, you're on mute.
I can hear something, but it's not audible.
Let me.
That's my dog licking out. I'm
How is that? Can you
There,
hear
now
me
we can hear you. Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks.
There's Larry. All right, and Diane?
Diane Ward.
And Pam?
Yep. Hi, I'm Pam.
All right, so those are our 5 managers, and then we'll do staff. I'm Tina Karstens, District Administrator. Nicole?
Nicole Soderholm, Permit Coordinator.
And Dave?
Dave Lawson, District Technician.
And Bill?
Bill Bartoje, Natural Resources Specialist.
And Paige?
Paige Alberg, Project Manager.
And I want to introduce you. We have our newest staff member here tonight, also to listen in. Lauren Hazenson is here. Lauren, go ahead and do a brief introduction now. Lauren is our new Communications and Outreach Coordinator, and she wanted to listen tonight.
Hello, I'm not technically an employee till Monday, but I'm a little eager to get started. So joining you all tonight. Yes, I've worked about 15 years in the public sector, mostly in nonprofits. And I've been doing communications work for a Minneapolis neighborhood association that covers about 14,000 people. And before that, I was with the National Marrow Donor Program doing communications work for them. So in my current work, I do both communications and program work. And a good chunk of that is green initiatives. So we have covered, if you've ever heard of the Minneapolis Monarch Festival, I do a lot of communications work for them. Done a lot of rain gardens, done a lot of bioswales, done a lot of community meetings for groundwater issues around Lake Nokomis. We've had carp infestations, all of those fun things that it looks like you all experience as well. So I'm excited to bring my skills to work here and get to know you all.
Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And then we have our engineering and attorney staff. Tracy, why don't you go ahead and go first?
I'm Tracy Gallows, the attorney representing the Watershed District.
And Erin?
I'm Erin Anderson-Wenz with Bar Engineering Company.
And Brad?
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Lindeman with Bar Engineering as well, District Engineer.
And then we'll go through our visitors that we have here. I'll call on you, and if you could unmute and say your name and who you're representing or your address. And then if you would like to speak during visitor comments. Bert, you want to go first?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Bruce Copley, SU Edition. I have a few words to say.
Okay, and then Bert.
Bert Johnson, Twin Lake Association. I do have some comments. Thanks.
And I have Melissa Elke, or Elk.
Yep, Elke. Yep, this is Melissa. I live on Twin Lake as well. No comments.
Okay, thank you. Bill Dirks.
Bill Dirks, City of Little Canada Public Works Director.
All right, and Ward.
Yeah, Ward Isaacson, Twin Lakes Association. No comments right away, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. All right. Before you move on to approval of the agenda, I just want to take a moment to talk about the consent agenda because it's a little different this month in order to try and save some time for some more meaty discussion later on. I moved items that I thought would have little to no discussion needed into the consent agenda. If you're interested in pulling any items for discussion off of the consent agenda, you would do it now before we approve the agenda. But it suggests anything that wants to be moved off of consent for discussion be moved right after the consent agenda approval so that we can stay in order on our packet, because I know it's a big packet and it's going to be hard to flip around to the different items. So I can do that if there's items that you wish to remove. Otherwise, anything that stays on consent agenda will be approved next after the approval of the agenda under consent with one motion. And just a reminder that all motions tonight require a roll call vote. And so Marge will call for those with each motion. I think that's everything, unless I'm missing something.
Are we ready for the approval of the
I'll turn it over
agenda?
to you.
Is there anything anybody wants to remove from the consent agenda? No. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval of the agenda.
Is there a
I'll
second?
Second.
Larry.
Oh, okay, we'll go around the room. Tina, as you can see the pictures, I'll start with Cliff since he's up.
Aye.
Okay, Larry,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
and then Marge.
Aye.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Are we gonna do now the rest of the agenda?
So it would be the consent, so it would be approval of the consent agenda would be next.
Right. Okay, again, does anybody want to remove anything or change anything?
No, we would have already had to do that. So now we're just approving the consent agenda.
All right, well, we have to go around the room again.
We need a motion first.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Pam, did you second?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll second.
I'll vote yes.
All right, Cliff,
Pam,
Aye.
okay.
Larry,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
and Pam.
Aye.
All right, that brings us to the visitors' comments. And again, there's, we'll give 4 minutes to, I think we've got 2 presenters, and there's no interaction. It's our job just to listen to what they have to say. So who do we have first, Tina?
First, we have Bruce Copley.
Okay, Bruce,
Okay.
welcome back.
Thank you. Good to see you all. In the project and program status reports under the West Vadnais to South I-694 conveyance feasibility study, I have a couple of comments. It's very much appreciated that you decided to take a more thorough look at the option of opportunistic pumping of West Vadnais Lake, so I do appreciate that. I would like to suggest a few changes, modifications to the study that might improve the final value of the study. First, I would like to see the modeling span from 2014 to 2019. It's proposed to do only 2015 to 2018. Both 14 and 19 were high water years, and the impact of pumping West Vadnais Lake on flooding north of I-694 would probably have been most significant during these periods. I think 2019 is particularly important because all of the staff gauges, piezometers were in place, and most of the culvert, berm, and ditch upgrades were completed. This year might better, the year of 2019 might better reflect what to expect in the future from opportunistic pumping. Second, I would like to see the impact on overflow into the five-star estates and Twin Lakes as part of the output. Also, to answer the question as to whether or not Rice Street and Ramsey Road would have flooded if the pumping had been in place, and estimate how much water would have or would have not entered Wetland A. Third, when estimating the water levels downstream in Jarvis and Owasso Basin, it should be clearly stated if the estimated water levels would have in fact created any specific problems in these two areas. if the pumping had taken place. And fourth, one option proposed is to pump into a downstream manhole on I-694 culvert. I like this addition to the evaluation, but would also want to know if this can be expanded as follows. And that would be, I would like to know if the pump outlet can be fed all the way to the end of the culvert and then use the pump as a year-round outlet for West Vadnais Lake. I am assuming that you can pump at a higher rate than the 4 CFS capacity of the existing culvert that's just done through gravity feed. With a pipe and pump more permanently installed on the I-694 culvert, the flow rates could be adjusted as needed throughout the year and hopefully be able to dramatically increase the throughput of this culvert by the use of active pumping. Getting somewhere up to 10 CFS from this route would be very significant. And so thanks very much for keeping this project active and considering some other options.
Thank you. And who do we have next, Tina?
Bert Johnson would be next.
Bert?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Tina. Also, thanks, Tina, for continuing conversations, and thanks to Paige for putting on a Zoom presentation about shoreline restoration. That was very helpful and informative for people on Twin Lake, and it sounds like there's a lot of interest in that program that's developing around Twin Lake to get our shorelines potentially participating in that as a public project. So thanks for that. As you know, so I'm Bert Johnson. I'm president of the Twin Lake Association, and we started this lake association about a year ago, not quite a year ago now, with the idea that we would advocate for 3 things on Twin Lake. And I've said these 3 things every time I've talked to you all, but this is why we exist as a lake association. And one, it's to restore the outlet on Twin Lake at its historic elevation, which I understand has been established as at 872.2. 2, to prevent the inflow from West Vadnais of excess water that our lake just simply doesn't have capacity to handle. And then 3, to restore and preserve the water quality of Twin Lake. So those have been the 3 organizational goals that we've had since establishing our lake association. And tonight's watershed meeting is a really momentous occasion for one of those 3, which is the outlet. So we know that the outlet project is actually on the agenda. The outlet project itself, I'm not an engineer, but it seems like it does accomplish in the long run to establish a predictable surface elevation for Twin Lake. So we appreciate all of your work up to this moment, and certainly support that project move forward. The next part is that I know you need to do a permit, so sounds like that's something that you would do. And then the third one is on the operations plan. I had some conversation with Tina, so I think I understand it better. And our understanding of the operations plan is that pumping would be opportunistic at the 872.8 level. I'm sorry, the gate would be opened. Tina, I can see your reaction there. I keep saying pumping, but it's not pumping. So the gate would be closed during the spring, essentially the March to October months, other than when the level hits 872.8, at which point it could be pumped, it could be opened and released down to 872.2, and that would be the level. But the gate would also be a backstop to prevent backflow into Twin Lake from the property to the southeast. So that, that's a range that, I mean, and I can't speak for we haven't talked to everybody on the lake, but it sounds reasonable to me. And certainly we'd like to see that move forward. And, our goal is to have that permanent level be as predictable as possible. And I think both based on this operations plan, that the level should be held to the extent possible. It's 872.2 through this operations plan. And after talking to Tina, I think it does do that. So we can anticipate that 872.2 is the norm, and that'll be the level that'll be established. As far as the West Vadnais scenario, I agree with Bruce's comments about the need to look at as quickly as we possibly can, just continue to look at the capacity in West Vadnais, not just to prevent West Vadnais from flowing into Twin Lake, which it hasn't done like it did last year, but also to help other folks to the north that have really chronic water level issues, and that's right next to Twin Lake. So it's going to be a concern of ours until that's completed, because the one place where water flows from north of 694 to south is right between Vadnais and Twin Lake along, I think it's Twin Lake Boulevard. So, we're watching that very closely and would encourage the district to keep moving in that direction, as Bruce said. So thank you again, and appreciate all the work that you put into the outlet scenario, and we're interested in having predictable surface elevation.
Thank you. The next category is permit program. And that, I believe, is 20-19.
That's correct. And I'll have Nicole lead that one off for us.
Hi, everybody. This permit was pulled from the consent agenda just because there are a couple of variances requested. So we wanted to make sure if you had any questions on those. But essentially, the city of Maplewood is reconstructing County Road B and Arcade. They will be constructing a filtration basin in a park to partially meet their volume reduction requirement. They have available banked credits. The city has accumulated quite a lot, so they are looking to withdraw banked credits to meet the rest of that requirement. The variance requests, one are for failing to meet the TSS, or total suspended solids removal requirement. A lot of that is because of that off-site treatment with the banked credits. They just weren't able to get there. And then the second variance is for wetland and buffer impacts. We have some temporary buffer impacts outlined in a figure in the board packet. And then they were also issued a utility exemption for 41 square feet of permanent impact to install a flared end, I believe it was. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Is there a motion?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, so if it's not, they're falling short of meeting the 90% total suspended solids. So my question is, does that mean that after this project is completed, there will be more pollution flowing into our water system than that would be in the existing conditions now?
No, because of the filtration basin is removing 318 pounds of TSS. So the proposed TSS load is less than in existing conditions.
Okay.
I think Larry, did you have your hand up?
I was going to move we approve project number 20-19.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All right, we're going to do this again. All in favor, and we have to go around the room. So I'll go first. Yes.
And then Cliff?
Larry?
Cliff votes aye.
Larry?
Larry votes aye.
Diane?
Aye.
And Pam?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Unanimously, by the way. Now at least on my agenda, I'm down to the enforcement action report.
That's correct, yeah.
All right, are we gonna do this?
Well, if there's any comments, otherwise we can move on unless somebody
All
has.
right.
Okay.
Stewardship grant program. And again, it says see consent agenda, budget status update, comments, questions. Okay, under the consent agenda, presentations and action items. I've got, if I can read this, Twin Lake Outlet Operations Plan.
Yes, so we do have 3 items as shown on the cover sheet for this We have the operations plan, we have our district permit application, and then we have the authorization for soliciting bids for construction of the outlet. I think I don't know if Brad or Aaron wants to start kind of heading off the discussion on this. Which one of you was planning to do that? Brad?
Well, I can start and Aaron can jump in. You know, it's my understanding, and this is how we've laid it out in the project status report, that you know, from the presentation that was given of the highlights of the operating plan that would go along with the Twin Lake outlet that was presented back in March, the board directed BAR and watershed staff to see if there were opportunities to open up the outlet to let more volume go out of Twin Lake under different scenarios. We've laid that out in the status report. I guess I'd like to hear from any of the managers if you feel we've accurately depicted what you've directed us to do back 2 months ago, and if we've explained things in the highlights of the operating plan that's included here in the status report, if that's accurate, because it does influence the next two steps in this, whether or not you should consider the permit with a variance or some other approach to the permit, and then you know, the authorization of the actual finalizing the plans and developing the bidding documents and advertising the project for bid. So a lot of it does tie back to this operating plan and how you'd like to approach that. So we want to make sure we've explained things in that document so it's very understandable and that the board understands what we're laying out there, and the changes in Jarvis Lake that are driven by the changes in this operating plan. And again, this isn't the actual operating plan. These are just the highlights that would go into that final document, but it does kind of lay it out like we understood the board directing us to do. So Aaron, did you have anything you'd like to add before we just kind of see if the board is clear on what we've laid out and if we've addressed the things they asked us to?
I think that's a good place to start. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Is it one of our guiding principles to actually move water downstream from one spot to another?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, yeah, water management is one of our, you know, it's our job to manage that water flow regionally to different cities and systems. But you have a lot of options, I guess, on how to best do that.
So that doesn't set a precedent of any kind.
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
I think we're obligated to address the fact that Twin Lake doesn't have an outlet, and that's moving water downstream. So I think we're obligated to fulfill this need, and we've identified a project and an operating plan to try to achieve that, while trying to also not flood properties downstream. So that's kind of what we're talking about. I mean, I personally went through the operating plan, was kind of surprised it was explained so well. So I think you did a good job. I think it did address the issues that we talked about at the March meeting, so I'm satisfied.
Anyone else?
Larry has his hand up.
Am I on?
Yeah,
Yep.
Go ahead, Larry.
Yes.
I have to speak to be on.
You've got
huh?
your
Good.
hand up, I can't.
Okay, I also agree with Cliff. I went through it in some detail and thought it was very well done. To address the issue that Marge is talking about, basically the way I understand our obligation is that we're trying to balance the needs of the entire watershed district, which includes upstream as well as downstream. So sometimes we're going to have to send water downstream, but we don't want to do it in a way that impacts the people downstream negatively. So the rule doesn't say we can't send things downstream. The rule says that we're trying to keep things balanced throughout the watershed district. At least that's the way I read it.
Yeah,
Well, that makes sense. Anybody else?
Can I just jump in here and regarding the rules? I mean, so our regulatory program, the way we've interpreted our rules and used them on other applicants is anytime that we increase flood levels downstream of a project in places where there's already homes at risk, that would be a variance from our rules. So that's why we have that variance request in the permit application. Need to be considered and decided on by the board.
So again, I'll jump in here, and it's not the outlet that is creating the need for a variance. It's the operating plan. So the elements of the operating plan that were presented back at the March meeting did not generate through modeling an increase in the flood level in Jarvis Lake. The highlights of the operating plan that you see in the board packet today do actually increase the flood level in Jarvis Lake by 0.02 of a foot. Granted, not much, but you asked us to look for ways to open it up more and minimize how much change would be downstream. So those are kind of the differences. So, and I'll ask Tracy to jump in here after I'm done. In essence, the operating plan highlights presented in March would not require a variance, the way I understand it. But the way we interpret the rules, the highlights of this operating plan that's shown in the May board packet would.
Right, and I know, Diane, you had your hand raised, so I don't know if you want to comment before I get in, or Pam, but the concern is if you pick an operating plan that will require a variance, certainly you're going to have to weigh all the risk of a variance. And certainly then you'll have to be ready to answer to any kind of liability that might happen as a result of, water downstream and a result of your variance. So I have to say it's really unusual that a municipality would seek a variance of their own permitting, especially one that could create risk downstream for flooding. So if in fact you can achieve most of your goals without an operating plan that requires a variance, I would really encourage that. It will be for the districts to exercise their discretion on what's the best operating plan, considering all the science that's behind it and as presented by bioengineering. But I do have some concerns about Rule D and following, trying not to need a variance for our own permitting.
Thanks, Tracy. You kind of answered some of my questions, which were really like, are we to try to reduce potential flooding of people upstream, putting at risk people at downstream, and that's what our variance would do. And I agree with what you said, Tracy. I think that's risky. And I know we had that conversation before, and I guess I just wasn't clear on that. And I agree with you that we should try to make our operating plan work in a way that we don't require that variance, because we don't want that increased liability.
I mean, that's my advice too, but the manager's job is to be educated and have the experts tell you what our opinions are, and then it'll be the discretion of the board or the action that you take.
So Diane has had her hand up. We'll go to her next.
Yeah, that was a good segue into what I wanted to talk about, which is what we're really looking at on all of these water management issues is risk and risk assessment of the benefits versus the drawbacks. And I agree that this was really helpful to take our comments and respond to them. But for me, it helps a little bit to understand the definitions better. So when you say it raises the flood level, I'm looking at page 5, where the existing conditions of 100-year peak water surface elevation at Jarvis Lake is 861.66. How far is that elevation from what it is now? From what Lake Jarvis is now?
You mean at this point in time, like today?
Yeah.
Probably close to 858 right now, aren't we? Dave, do you know?
858 is the considered
Normal.
normal elevation, the control elevation,
right,
at the Keller control structures. So it's probably slightly above that because there's probably water flowing over that. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
without actually
So
looking at it today.
So that 100-year peak is 2 or 3 feet above what it is now, right?
3.5, yeah.
3.5.
Okay, you're
Yep.
talking about if you do this, this plan of releasing water, that it could raise Jarvis a scant 1/4 inch, right? That's what 0.02 is
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, 200. Yep.
And it's probably quite a bit above the ordinary high water too. So we're not really talking about starting at flood stage and raising it a 1/4 inch. You're talking about raising it up to a 1/4 inch at whatever level it's at the time, right?
Can I just, and Brad, correct me if I'm wrong here, but just to help explain that. So that elevation is the 100-year peak surface water. Brad, maybe you can just speak to that real quick before I, the difference between those homes on Jarvis under normal conditions, right, under normal water levels, are with a 100-year storm is on top of that normal water surface, they are flooded. So they don't have that 100-year surface elevation is in their home already at normal water levels. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And Aaron, maybe you recall offhand how many homes are there? 2 homes on Jarvis that are below that 100-year flood level?
I think that's right. It's 2 or 3. I think it's 2.
There's 2 more that are at risk from wave action. So there's
right.
4 total. But 2
yeah, but 2 that are below that elevation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's 4 homes at risk.
One 100-year storm would raise it up to 861.66 from where it is now.
Well, from the starting elevation that is at the control elevation at Keller. And again, I can't tell you from where it is today, but the standard approach in hydrologic modeling and flood planning, you would start from the control elevation and work up from there for planning purposes. So,
and that's what I was trying to understand is is it one storm that is going to take it up to this risky area and then adding a 1/4 inch is going to put us over the top or what?
so those homes are already below that level of the 100-year storm under the current conditions without sending any more water that direction. We do have an emergency response plan that we've worked with the city of Little Canada to implement should we feel like that 100-year flood level is imminent.
But part of the operating plan also calls for anticipating storm events where even if the gate was open, it would be closed to not allow more water to get through. So
just a reminder on that. That is,
we do have some protections built in.
well, that's protections for North Star State because that water gets to North Star within 6 to 10 hours. But we can't, doing that doesn't give the same protection to Jarvis. We don't have.
There's time delay, yeah.
There's, at least 2 weeks or 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks.
Something like that. You'd have to close that gate weeks before the storm event. And
okay.
The forecasting inaccuracies come into play.
So again, the issue on Jarvis Lake is the amount of volume that gets there that's taken up, where the issue on North Star Estates is a rate issue. Yeah. So that's why you can be closer to the storm event, see it coming and say that looks like a big storm, we'll cut off that rate getting to Owasso Basin.
Aren't we also though talking about Jarvis Lake is a critical snowmelt situation as its critical storm, whereas summertime rainfalls typically don't affect Jarvis Lake in that same way.
So with Atlas 14, and Aaron, you can jump in here, with Atlas 14, when we updated that, this is the flood level that's generated. There's the 2 homes or 3 homes that we had mentioned are actually under the 100-year that's generated by the Atlas 14 rainfall, not snow melt, but it's
Okay.
a summertime issue.
Okay.
This
that
is
correct,
looking
Aaron?
at, yeah, this is looking at a 4-day event, and
Yeah.
and we can get real technical if you want, but it's a 4-day event that looks at the intensities, critical intensities of lesser events as well. So you can think of it as this is it's a 4-day storm event. Yeah, not snow melt.
Larry, go ahead.
I have a question. How, to Brad or Aaron, how accurate is the model? When you're talking about this volume of water, putting it into something like Jarvis Lake, and you're telling us that it's 1/4 of an inch, it's going to go up. What kind of reliability do we have with that? Is that absolute, or could it just as easily be 1/4 inch down, depending on the feed, the information you feed into the model?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, you probably understand more of the intricacies of the model.
Well, I mean, I think, so models have all sorts of assumptions that have all sorts of variability, that's for sure. I think the important thing to note here is that we're looking at the difference. So the model under proposed conditions, the model results you're seeing for the proposed conditions and the model results you're seeing for existing conditions are all done on the same platform of the model with the same assumptions. The only thing changing being the operating plan. So the relative difference is maybe even the more important decision item to follow, because what we're seeing is that there's an increase. So that's a pretty confident conclusion. But you're right. I mean, there's all sorts of variabilities in models, and actually the biggest one being this model, this storm event that we're talking about, design one. So it's just the way that we look at what peak levels could be. It's kind of a standard engineering practice, but it's not a real storm. It's a design one. So Brad, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think that's absolutely right. It's the same inputs, except for that additional flow. It's the same that we've used to generate the current 100-year flood level that's on Jarvis, and then we're adding the new flow into it. So those other assumptions are the same. They're the same. So it's really the relative difference.
Brad or Aaron, is it possible that with an operating plan that doesn't require the variance, that there will still be benefit to the folks upstream versus putting additional risk to Jarvis downstream? I mean, are you able to put in place an operational plan that still will achieve most of the goal without the risk of exacerbating flooding downstream?
This is yes, first of all, short answer. And I think an operating plan that is similar to what was presented in March does just that, because with those elements of that plan, it did not show any rise downstream. Now, albeit there are other variations of an operating plan that may be also developed, but I think we illustrated concepts that would go into an operating plan back in March that does just that, Tracy. So that's the way I see it.
And the reason why I kind of ask that as a legal perspective is because when we seek a bit variance, right, we want to make sure that it's not going to nullify the intent of the rule. And of course, Rule D is to make sure that there isn't flooding happening or as a result of a project that could cause flooding downstream. So we really do want to make sure, if we can, really avoid granting ourselves a variance that might really nullify the intent of Rule D and preventing flooding downstream.
If I may, my question also is, if we've got a plan that we can use, and I missed the March meeting, so I didn't get all of the discussion, but why are we not using that plan and not doing the variance? Cliff?
Yeah, that was going to be my comment. the plan presented in March that would not increase flood levels would also not allow any discharges during the summertime, because basically the outlet would be closed between, what were the dates again, April 1st to November 1st or something like that. Whereas our discussion in March, we talked about taking advantage of opportunistic discharges. Say Twin Lake is up near its high level under this plan, so 873 point whatever, and it was the start of the summer and the gate had to be closed. That would mean the water level would increase further during the summer until it got up to 873.8. Was that the level? And then it could be opened. But my thought was, if we had a dry summer, if we've got a dry stretch, if the lake level is above normal, above 872.5, that we would be able to open the gate, let some discharge, but have to close it if we see impending large rainfalls. At least it would allow the lake to kind of stabilize and not just constantly build up during the summer. And that was my thought. So I think the current operating plan does that with a 1/4 inch increase in Lake Jarvis. I know it provides us a variance, but I can't see where a homeowner would say on Lake Jarvis that, oh, I'm flooded and that 1/4 inch is what's really causing my damage and you're liable for it. So it's just speculation, but that was my thought process.
Anyone else?
Larry does have his hand up.
Yeah, I agree with Cliff on that, because it seems we had this discussion before, and I think it's the minutes or the information noted, we actually were comfortable with even a larger increase than a 1/4 inch. Again, this is going to become important as we try to equalize out the watershed district with all kinds of processes to move water from one end to the other. The other part this doesn't take into account is what are going to be the effects of the Phelan and the Keller weirs when we get that done. That can lower things down again. So I'm personally not uncomfortable. I understand what Tracy is saying, but I'm not uncomfortable with going ahead with the variance given how small this is, because I think it'd be very, very hard for someone to say that's what caused my problem, particularly if we're careful about how we manage the system. And that's basically the advice, as I understand it, the advice we give to the City of Canada was actually going to be operating.
I could offer,
sorry.
I'll just offer, because Larry, you bring up a good point with respect to the modifications that are in design process for the Keller control structure and the Phelan outlet structures. Those could allow for the operating plan that's laid out in tonight's board packet. They could allow that for resulting in no rise. Now, you also have to factor in those control elements are subject to an operating plan that not just takes into account Twin Lake and West Vadnais water, but also water coming from all parts of the Phelan chain. But there is likely some opportunity there. I can't guarantee that at this point. But one option you could consider is moving forward with the operating plan as it's been laid out in March, and after the operating plan for Phelan and Keller is developed, we could see if we could change the operating plan to allow more out in Twin. And again, we're in the design mode for those control structure, modification. And depending on permitting, it'll come down to permitting when we actually get that put in place. But we're moving forward with that as you've asked us to. So it might be that interim step that might make other managers feel a little more comfortable in the interim.
I like that idea.
Am I understanding that, Brad, what you just proposed would allow us to move forward with the operating plan without needing a variance at this moment?
Well, you'll need an operating plan of some sort for that outlet. And
Right.
we've actually, in essence, offered up two different variations of that, the one in March and the one you see tonight in the board packet. So the one in March does not require a variance the way we interpret the rules. The one that's laid out tonight, which lets more water out, which is, to Mr. Johnson's comment, it does improve things in Twin. It keeps under certain conditions, lets more water out, but it does generate changes downstream that we have to at least highlight for all of you in your decision-making process. So it doesn't have to be a plan that you approve tonight that is permanent forever and perpetual. It can be modified as the control structures and that operating plan downstream are implemented, because as you know, we've got many other things that we're trying to evaluate for board decisions in the future. But that one, the board chose to move ahead with the actual design and implementation. So we know those are going to go in.
Right, Cliff had his hand up.
Yeah, on second thought, I'd be in support of going back to the March operating plan, as long as we all agree that we will revisit this as soon as we have designs and an operating plan for the Keller channel structure and the failing outlets to see what impact that provides to the system. We also have to keep in mind that we're talking about possible additional flows coming from West Vadnais, and that's going to also add into this whole situation. So they all have to balance at some point.
Somehow it just seems like a more prudent sort of way to go, to try and stick to the original plan without work all these pieces together to try and solve whatever problems arise.
And revisit it
I'm
at a
agreeing
later
with you,
time.
Brad and Cliff, is what I'm doing.
I think Larry had his hand up.
Yeah, I agree basically with what Cliff said. It looks to me like we're in a condition right now as a board and as a watershed district where we have a lot of complexity that's coming up as far as moving water from one place to another. It's not just out of the north part of the watershed district, but it's even in the south part. And we have a number of projects going on, and maybe it is the best thing to say, okay, we're just going to leave winter pumping or winter adjustment as it is right now, see what happens. We have a plan that's been suggested that we can implement if we need to, as we maybe understand more and become more comfortable with what it means to put a quarter of an inch or an inch extra of water downstream from here. That's where I start to think about this is in terms of risk. Again, I understand what Tracy is saying. The bottom line is at some point, you have to take a risk with something. You just want it to be prudent if you're going to take it. I think risk-free. And you also, if you don't take any risk at all, you're going to impact somebody. That's the way water works. It all depends on how comfortable we are. Again, at the meeting where we discussed this before, the last time we were able to meet as a physical group, we did become comfortable with increasing some of the level downstream. So we know that that's possible to do. Maybe it's that we need more information on this to become more comfortable with what we're going to do. And maybe going back to, because from Twin Lakes point of view and from the West Vadnais point of view, doing something is better than doing nothing. And so if we have to be conservative to start with, and then as we become more comfortable, we can maybe expand that, I'm okay with that.
Okay, at this point,
Marge,
what do
Diane,
we,
hand up.
go ahead, Tina.
Diane has her hand up.
I just wanted to say that what I liked about this plan was that I thought it was conservative enough in protecting Jarvis. I liked having some flexibility. What I'd like to know is how long is it going to take for these design plans? Because if we have a drought this summer, are we going to miss out on moving any water downstream that we could have? the flip side of what everybody's talking about is approve this and then revisit it when the design is done. So for Keller and Phelan. So how long is that going to take?
The design part will take through the summer. The permitting part, I cannot speculate at this time because as you saw in the challenges with even lowering the West Vadnais outlet, sometimes with that's well out of our control, even when we give them all the information that we need to give them. So I can't give you a specific time frame. I do know when the design will be wrapping up, and that is later this summer. And then we would move directly into, depending on the board's willingness to move into the advertisement, bidding, and construction process, because that's it'll be a big ticket item, and so you'll have to weigh that with other priorities in your budget. But I'm assuming this will be a high priority item, so the unknown there is the permitting piece.
So we can go ahead with the outlet, but what I'm asking is if we have a dry summer, we're missing out on being able to move any water at all out of Twin Lake this summer because it's not within the April through October time period.
Somebody.
Well, yeah, well, some of that will depend on when the outlet for Twin Lake gets installed also. the schedule for that is this summer also, correct? For the construction of that outlet, that'll be being constructed during the summer. So
right.
You might miss that period because the outlet's not there yet either.
So as I see it, we're looking at two options. One, going back to the plan in March that doesn't have a variance and that also will incorporate other changes that are now in the process for the whole Phelan chain, or going with this with a variance. Is that correct? Somebody.
Marge, that
Yes.
seems correct. And I just want to say I appreciate the wonderful, thoughtful discussion. And if the board at all would be willing to just allow this to go without a variance and see what other options Bar Engineering can come up with, and as far as it relates to the operating agreement, from a legal perspective, I just feel really comfortable that that's a really prudent step because you have staff stating concern, you have your engineers stating concerns, and yet you still have the opportunity to maximize this benefit. Maybe not this summer, Diane, but at least in the future with some of these other things that are going on simultaneously. I just literally don't want to use this pun, but I am also concerned about the floodgate of allowing a variance of this nature to yourself, which would be very hard in the future to defend when someone wants to let just a quarter inch of water downstream. You did it for yourselves. How come you're not going to let me do it for this 500,000 project? So if there is a good result that can still, it might delay things a little bit, but it still gives you an opportunity to do that without taking the step. I just want to tell you that that would be really my preference from a legal perspective. So I appreciate, Cliff and Larry and Dane, all reconsidering kind of what you thought in March and changing, back to kind of what was presented. But I also think Bar has done a great job of really digging in and trying to figure out another way to resolve this without you having to get your variance. So I really like those options for the board.
Diane has her hand up.
Does that mean there's a third option, Brad and Aaron, or are we still just talking about the two?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had asked Aaron and Brad to think about that if there was either or, I guess is the question.
Well, with the discussion of going back and looking at solutions, I'm just wondering, is there something different? Or are you just talking about reworking the numbers when you get the Keller and Phelan Weir pieces figured into the model?
And I'll speak first and then let Aaron. I guess it was, again, what I was referring to as, basically what was presented, and that would mean the outlet stays closed until that time in late fall, early winter that was laid out in the March proposal. And then in the meantime, continue on with the Phelan-Keller outlet design and the operating plan that would go with it, and enter into the permitting process. And I guess we can talk about it as we get to the design and permitting process and start getting feedback from the regulators on our operating plan and our outlet modifications. If we could be assured of a certain operating plan that would allow it, before it's actually put in place, you might be able to look at it earlier then. But a lot of it ties to that those changes downstream that we're hoping to make sooner rather than later. Aaron, did you have something to add?
No, I mostly agree. I think one thing that we could do is, one of the things that was changed from the March plan was, if you remember back in March, we had talked about the gate being open between November 15th and February 15th. One of the smaller parts of the changes for the May plan that you've seen in the packet is that it would be open from November 1st to March 1st. So that's not a big change, but there was a little bit longer period. And I don't know if that in itself is enough to change that impact to be something greater than 0. So that's one thing we could look at. And then, I think the main thing, the biggest thing is having that gate opened if the lake reaches 872.8. So I think that's the one that really causes the difference. But we could certainly look to see if the operating period could be that larger amount. And the reason I keep looking to my right is that my other screen is up and I'm looking at the differences between the two plans. So I'm not watching TV over here. I think that's the main thing. Yeah. Cliff.
One little tweak I thought of. What if the chain of lakes gets down below normal? Diane mentioned the drought. If it were to drop below 858 and we knew we had leeway, couldn't we open up Twin Lake outlet?
Yeah, thank you. That was the one I was trying to, was the one I was trying to find in my brain. Yeah, that is another stipulation that I think still allows us to have no change downstream. If those are really lower than their outlet elevations, then there's extra space. So yeah, I think
we could add that in without changing anything.
Right.
Okay.
And I'll just mention Dave had texted me on the side. Thanks, Dave. He looked at or called in for the elevation at Jarvis or Spoon for now. It's just so you know, it's 858.4. So it's close to that elevation. Diane, has her hand.
Just quickly, that idea of if the elevations were low enough, then open it up. Would that be part of the operating plan then? Or would that be something where somebody had to say, hey, where's Jarvis at? Can we open it now? I think it needs to be in there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's reasonable. And I think that could be part of the operating plan. And, I think that's reasonable.
So again, just so I understand what we're talking about, are we saying that we actually are going back to the plan that didn't include the variance and moving forward on opportunities to improve whatever we had?
I'm for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say the March operating plan, along with the addition of opportunistic discharge if the chain of lakes drops below normal level.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, and we agree to that? I like that. Pam, how about you?
Yep, I like that.
Cliff?
Yeah, I think Larry has a question.
Yeah, and Diane both.
Okay, Larry.
Not a question, but more or less a comment. And again, this has been brought up, and I guess I hadn't conceptualized this, but one of the things we're trying to do now is to give permission to go ahead and solicit bids. So if we move ahead on that, by the time we get the bids done, the engineering is finished, construction starts, and the construction's finished, we're going to have at least 3 more board meetings to be able to visit this as we gain more information. And after this great discussion, Bar and staff can take a look at maybe different ways of looking at it. So I'm comfortable with that at this point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I was going to ask Brett and Aaron to just comment on that, the connection between the construction documents and the operation plan. And does the operation plan change the design documents at all?
It does not change the design documents at all. What it does is it will flow into the permitting process. So before we can actually start with breaking ground is when we need to have that permit in place, and Nicole needs to be notified and come out and make sure we have our erosion control in place, and then we can start, right? But as far as the design and the bidding and the receiving of bids and the award, all that can happen in the meantime. And that's the other piece of what we are asking the board to authorize tonight through a motion to move forward with that. And that comes later in these action items, is to move forward with that based on the design that you see. But the design does not have to be modified either way. And the outlet can go in regardless. But we just want to have a good understanding of the operating plan so we can develop that in response to the permit requirements.
If it's appropriate, I will move that we, am I on? Yeah. I'll move that we adopt a preliminary operating plan that's similar to the March proposal, with the addition of including potential discharge if the chain of lakes downstream is below normal level. And the understanding that we'll revisit this in the next few months if we need to before construction is completed.
That, just for me, that means we don't need a variance, right?
Correct.
Okay, I'll second that. Or no, I can't. Somebody else.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay. I second that. I think that's a good idea. All right. Any other discussion? Otherwise, we'll take a vote.
Yeah. Diane has her hand up.
Just to, I guess it's more of an understanding that at that time we'll also be looking at what benefit the Phelan and Keller Weirs are adding to the options, right?
Yeah, you'll see information on both items as we march through the summer, for sure.
Right, but it'll be factored into this finalizing of the exact language of the operating plan, and we'll know the impact.
I believe that's true. Brad, Aaron, do you have any, does that make sense?
Aaron, why don't you comment on that?
Is it you?
Well,
Brad said there might possibly be no rise under the scenario. And if that's,
with the modifications on that and the operating plan tied, there might possibly, but again, as I said, you know, that now has to factor in other water coming from the industry.
Right.
But
absolutely.
It seems reasonable to assume that it would have added benefits. Yeah.
Or allow a little more flexibility or something. Yes. Okay. Otherwise, I don't have any other comments.
But just to clarify, the outlet project may be completed before we have all the data about the Phelan Keller channel. So we'll need an operating plan initially.
Yes.
But then I think we can move to revisit that operating plan once we get that additional data.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think yes, I agree. I mean, one of the biggest things we talked about in March, well, we talked about a lot of things, but was that outlet would be flexible. And so that outlet will be constructed in a way where that can be changed based on what functionality we have throughout the district at that time.
All right. A vote. I think I started this, I'm not sure. Pam? We're talking about.
Aye.
Okay. Marge, aye. Cliff?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Okay. So essentially, we're just saying we're going to keep operating, only we're not asking for a variance, and we're going to look at different ways to do this. Okay, where are we now?
So that,
permit.
yeah, that motion directed us to, and how you want us to move forward with the operation plan for now. So now we're on the permit, which is 2018. And with that change, then I believe, Brad, you had suggested we add a, was it a special provision, or we just don't need the variance, or how does that?
I would say you don't, and Tracy, you can help
Yep.
me here, but basically we don't need the variance. So anything that's tied to that in the actual permit would be removed.
I just want to point out there is still a variance for temporary wetland impacts. So,
Okay.
So we're saying as far as a permit, that there's no reason to, help me with this, Brad.
Yep, so now we have permit 2018, and Nicole can overview it. There's 2 variance requests as part of this permit.
Right.
Based on your motion, previous motion, the variance for rule D does not apply anymore.
that's correct.
Yep.
Okay, so we don't need a motion, we don't need anything, we'll just continue on.
We do. So I'm going to have Nicole overview the permit, and then we can take a motion on the permit.
Yeah, and Tina, actually, you just summarized exactly what I was going to say. This permit did trigger our rules because of the work in the floodplain. And based on tonight's discussion, the cover sheet should be amended, and maybe I can talk with Tina about how to memorialize that. But essentially, the language regarding variance request for Rule D would not apply. So you would be approving the permit if you so choose with the last remaining special provision and the last remaining variance request for wetland impacts for excavation.
So we need a motion to do that.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Anybody?
I'll move approval of 2018.
Is there a second?
Larry's got the second, I think. He had his hand.
I'll second it, yeah. But we have to do it with the, taking up the part about Rule D.
That will be omitted now.
Without the Rule D.
Right.
But isn't that what the motion should say? Is it, if we're going to.
Yes, it should.
Pointed out,
Yep.
17.
Yep.
I'll agree to that
Move
amendment.
approval with that amendment, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still second.
Okay, we have a motion. Larry, did you second that?
I did, yes.
All right, any more discussion on this? Let's take a vote. Larry?
Aye.
Marge? Aye. Pam?
Aye.
I think that was Diane, and then Cliff.
Aye.
Hope Diane still needs to vote too.
Oh,
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
So the last item then on the Twin Lake outlet is approving the preliminary design, estimated cost, and proposed project schedule, and direct staff to finalize the design and bidding documents and solicit bid proposals.
Okay, we need somebody to make a motion.
I move we approve agenda item 7A, Twin Lake outlet action.
Is there a second?
That was to approve the plans and
Specs.
preparation of plans and going out. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll second.
So if you'd like to use the actual motion that's drafted in quotes in the board packet, that would cover it, I guess.
That's good.
That's what
Okay.
I just said, yeah.
Okay. I'll agree to that.
All right, let's, all in favor, I'll start again with Cliff.
We have
Aye.
discussion if anybody has.
Pam? Larry?
Aye.
Marge, yes. Diane? Pam, did we get you?
I meant aye.
Okay.
Okay, motion carries, and we'll use the motion that was in the packet.
So I'll say, the process from here on out, we have already worked with Tracy's office to make sure we have the advertisement lined up and going to the district's legal newspapers. It will also go in a place, it's called Quest CDN. It's an online version of where contractors typically look. So that will go out yet this week. I don't know off the top of my head the exact date when bids are received, but typically it's at least a 2-week advertisement period. We'll receive bids back. We'll evaluate those bids, make sure they're all consistent with the bidding requirements, bring those back to the board next month with a recommendation. And then if you so choose to make an award next month, we'll move into the contracting phase and get the contractor engaged to start hopefully by the end of June or right around July 1st is what I would estimate when you'd see construction starting to happen. So.
Comments from anybody? Thank you, Brad.
Yep.
As usual, you're wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Marge.
So now on the agenda, somebody
Turn
help
off-
me. Where
Turn
are
off
we?
my video while I blush. Huh?
So,
Yeah.
so we are at item 7B, which is the Beltline Resiliency Study response to comments and finalization of report. Again, that was the item that I omitted from your original packet. I apologize for that, but hopefully you've had enough time in the last few days to review those. If we handle it similarly as we would for, let's say, a rule revision where we would solicit comments, or for our plan update, for instance, staff would prepare the response to comments, board would approve those and or accept them. It's not really approval, isn't really needed, but acceptance of them. And then what we would normally do is send those response to comments to the commenters. And as we've talked about with this study too, we can append them to the end of that study so that that record is included with the study as well. But if you have other ideas on how you'd like to manage those comments, we would take your comments on that too.
So Tina, do we need a motion to approve this?
So what I have on
or we're just going to discuss it, one of the two.
So what I have on the board action requested is to accept the response to comments and direct staff to append the responses to finalize the study report.
Okay. Cliff looks like he wants to say something. No, he doesn't.
Also move.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Okay.
Diane has her hand up.
There were 4 areas that I guess it's just comments. On number 5, which was about the 48-hour issue, I thought that could have been a little clearer. It didn't really make sense to me since the flooding that was talked about there wasn't just caused by rain and groundwater, natural causes. It was also caused by drainage maintenance issues. I don't know that makes a lot of difference, but I thought it could have been clearer. Number 13 is about the option on our agenda 9II about the West Vadnais Lakes lower outlet. And it lists 2 options there, but it doesn't include one of the ones that's in our packet tonight. So I think that should be added. And then I wanted to comment that in the area, I don't know if people divided up the comments or what, but all of the comments to Molly Churchich, I thought deserved more than a thank you and a commitment to work together. She did bring up some substantive items that I can guess what the answers are, but I thought it would have been better to add a little more feedback to her. And then my last one is on number 5, and I thought we should add that the watershed district has already started studying the system modifications that were mentioned there.
I'm sorry, what was that last number comment?
45.
45, okay.
Any other comments? All right.
I went through the the comments, which I have to say were fairly challenging because they're in 5-point type when you try to look at it. But is there a need to move ahead with this right now, or can we? Because I'm like Diane. I had some things in there I would like to have worked out with Tina before, and since we only got it on Monday, it's not to be critical, but it's just not enough time to be able to interact on this. My preference is to hold off until the next meeting to allow this to be released fully and to flesh out some of these comments in discussion. Maybe what's in there is right. I don't know, but I feel a little uncomfortable not being totally satisfied, I guess, with where some of the answers are.
Yeah, there is no rush per se. You know, I think everything that was commented on that would impact the feasibility studies that are underway has been taken into account. I don't know that there was anything in here that we wouldn't include in our feasibility study because these comments aren't approved or accepted. So I think, you know, we've already taken that into account or will be as we move forward.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. You know,
yeah, to you all.
No, some of the things that Diane mentioned make sense, and frankly, I wanted to do a little more homework on trying to understand some of the questions and the answers. Just before, it's not that I don't think it would give a good answer. It's just that before I say I think the answer was okay, I want to satisfy myself that I feel that way. I don't exactly feel that way now.
Well, if there's no urgency, then I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, if that's all right, I would just as soon, you know, have a little more time to take a look over it, because the Beltline study is pretty important. These people did take time to give input on it. And again, maybe it's me. I may end up the next meeting saying it's all okay. I don't actually have some, just didn't have time to go through it in the kind of depth that it deserved.
Do you want to move to table, Larry?
Okay.
Is there a second?
Well,
I mean,
I'll
I think we can table
remove
this if there's no urgency.
Yeah, Pam just seconded the motion to table.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor, I'll say yes. Larry,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Diane,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
and did we get you, Pam? I didn't hear you.
Yep.
Yeah, you
Okay.
did.
So motion passes, or this item will be tabled until when? The next meeting?
Next
Yeah,
meeting.
I can bring it back next month, and I'll make sure.
Okay. Administrators report.
Yeah, these are informational items unless you have any questions. The only update since I sent that is on the COVID-19. As you know, I'm sure that the stay-at-home order was extended till May 18th. So we're continuing on. We have implemented a mask policy under certain conditions for staff. If while they're doing their essential work, they cannot maintain their 6 feet distance, or if they are interacting with the public in any way while they're out in the field, they have to have a mask available for that interaction. Otherwise, we have continued with the same protocols as we have been for the last few weeks. So,
okay.
And we're also developing, or I'm thinking through what happens when the stay-at-home order is lifted and how that changes how we operate our business after that happens, and what different protocols we'll need in place for that.
9, project and program status reports. Do we want to go through each one of these, or if anybody has a question about any of these, to raise it to the rest of the managers and do it that way?
So I did star on the agenda 3 different items that would have particular updates or more information for discussion. of course, if there's any others that you're interested in hearing about or have questions about, we're happy to answer that. Otherwise, I thought in the matter to keep our time well spent, we could focus our attention on those items first.
Yeah, let's do those three first, Tina. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So the first item would be the West Vadnais to South I-694 conveyance feasibility study. And there was kind of a lengthy discussion kind of to walk us through some questions on what this looks like, what this feasibility looks like. And I'm going to have Brad and Aaron walk us through that.
Aaron, I'm going to probably call on you for most of this. I know you've had a lot of involvement with this and you can kind of hit the highlights. But I guess before we do that, it goes back to our understanding of what the board asked us to consider, and we've laid that out here. And in some cases, there's additional modeling, additional work, but I'm not sure that that's what the board is absolutely looking for in terms of opportunistic pumping. Maybe there's something else. I just want to make sure we've hit on the things that you asked us to look at, and although we haven't done them yet, we want to make sure we're giving you the information and giving you the data that you were hoping for, and we've described how or what we might do if this is the path you'd like us to go down. Aaron, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's right. I think the original scope summary that was put before the board for the West Vadnais to South I-69 conveyance study didn't necessarily address pumping explicitly, and didn't necessarily, well, I know it didn't address pumping explicitly, but it certainly could have been read in that way. Also, it didn't necessarily address opportunistic, more shorter term pumping, though that could easily be a part of that study. So we thought it would be good to lay this out and put it before the board to see, is this consistent with your wishes for the project and what we should look at? And then there's some questions sprinkled through here, such that if you do want us to look at this, there's some questions that we have just to help inform what we do, so that when we bring it back, it's helpful and what you expected. So I think I'll leave it to discussion at this point. Brad, is that?
Yeah, yep. And I think Larry, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, it's kind of a basic question, and that is that, is this really a two-part answer? One part is you're looking at, along with other feasibility studies at this point, having a system for West Vadnais to be able to move the water out more efficiently, minimally from November to March, the same way we do with Twin Lakes. And then also look at the issue of opportunistic pumping, or are they combined with each other? That's what I'm not clear about.
Well, as Aaron was describing, the opportunistic pumping essentially was not included in that original scope.
Right.
And now we are saying, if you would like us to include that in the original scope, this is how we'd approach it to help you make a decision on whether to do it or not. And that's so you can help quantify for yourselves whether there is the benefit you're looking for or not. I know we ran a particular series of storm events the last time you looked at this, and it may not have been satisfying to the point where you felt comfortable making a decision based on that. And so here would be the next level of detail that we could offer, but maybe it's not modeling you're looking for. Maybe it's not additional information on that you're looking for. And so that before we go down that path of additional modeling, running 3 years, or as Bruce was suggesting, 5 years through this whole system, are we headed down the right path from what you were hoping to see? Or do you have other information that you're looking for to make this decision on whether to pump or not to pump?
I guess from my point of view, what I think we're looking for is evaluation of the system will allow us to get water faster out of the West Vadnais Grass Lake area in a safe manner. Originally, the proposals, as I understood them, were to do winter pumping. And what we've asked for is to take a look at the opportunity to do opportunistic pumping. But the main thing is to have something in place to be able to move water out of here faster than waiting for the 15-inch pipe to get the water out of here. That's the main thing. The calculations to do opportunistic pumping, from my point of view, are secondary. They're not as critical as to get something done so that we can start to readjust the area.
My comment is somewhat concerned with that, but opportunistic pumping is problematic in the same sense we talked about Twin Lake. Because we said that pumping or letting Twin Lake outlet during the summertime could result in an increase in flood levels on Jarvis Lake. So any pumping from West Vadnais would clearly do the same thing during the summertime. Maybe not during the winter, but so I think with that consideration, we really need to look at it. Well, maybe we need to analyze it, but we need to really think whether or not it would really be possible. You asked a couple questions in here about what downstream changes in Jarvis water levels would be acceptable. And I think the only time it would be acceptable, I think, would be when Jarvis Lake water levels are below normal. Otherwise, it's going to raise flood levels. And then another question, when should pumping happen if we started it? Initially, I thought, well, we should think about pumping when the gravity outlet isn't accomplishing what we hope it would do and lake levels are still staying high. Then use pumping to augment it and try to bring levels down. But then I thought, well, maybe we should also think about pumping when it's near normal levels and use the dry periods to occasionally obtain more freeboard. So I don't know, but I think both those are possibilities.
Diane?
Sorry, Diane has her hand up.
Yeah, those are things I'm interested in too. So I thought I would just, using your outline, tell you what things would be helpful. I think, Des, at the bottom of page 2, you've listed a bunch of criteria to look at under the scope. And I like that. And I'd like to see it maybe in a chart form, if you could, so that we could be comparing the options. And you've already got cost, permitting needs, upstream benefits, downstream flood level changes. Those are all really good. I'd also like to see how many CFS would be gained under each option, because there's a difference. What the time frame would be to get started. Some were longer and shorter to start it. And then the winter pumping or expansion of water out versus opportunistic, or as Cliff has described, taking advantage. So if you could factor those in, then we'd have a way to kind of weigh them against each other. Maybe something's expensive, but it could be sooner and have more long-term benefit. I don't know. Or maybe it's not worth it to do one thing. So if that would help. I always kind of like a little longer time frame to look at, since we have such a variation of precipitation levels. So the 2014 to 2019 sounded good to me. I at least wanted to include the 2019 because you didn't have it available before, and now we have it. So why not use it? On the question of at what level would we start the pumping at of Westlake Vadnais, I don't know what the 881, why that was the limit. I can guess, I think it would be helpful to explain that in your first paragraph, but just based on that, that was what I was kind of looking at, was the 881. And then I agree, we have to do the same kind of analysis of the Lake Jarvis levels as we talked about with Twin. And like you talked about, Brad, with we're going to have more and more factors as you add in the Phelan and Keller weirs and different changes. So we're just going to have to balance all those and see where you come out on it. Let's see if I have anything else. I think about, the two options you had, the Stymie Pond and the lowered outlet. It seemed like, just from what you had here, that the Stymie Pond option would move water out quicker, but it had more problems in some ways with the permitting and stuff. So that's what I mean with the chart being helpful. It did seem to move more water out because you'd have that in addition to what was already coming out the normal outlet. So I think just laying those things out clearer would be really helpful. And then when we're talking about the second option, I want to know if there's options to speed up the water going through that outlet. Is there, force main, siphon, whatever, I don't know the language, but instead of doing the Stymie Pond addition, can you put an addition there that can be manipulated? And in the Beltline comments, it seemed like there was a third option of a totally different pipe. If that's really an option, then we should see that in your presentation too. And the other thing I noted in reading through the Beltline comments was that both Ramsey County and Shoreview weighed in as supporting this concept in some form. And I think that's an important thing to the board to know, that the city and the county would like something to happen. So I would like to see all those things I mentioned included and give us a chance to see both what you recommend and what the variety of options are and the risks, pro and con.
Just to be clear on that additional pipe, that was the essence of the feasibility study. It was the additional pipe in anticipation of the Owasso Basin bypass pipeline being installed, because that then would open up, more opportunities to let water downstream. So that will be in there for sure. So.
Good.
I want Aaron and or Brad to talk about that 881. So 881, will be the new normal water. Is that the right term? New normal water level for Vadnais Lake when we lower that outlet to 881. So that'll be normal.
It'll be the new outlet elevation.
A new outlet elevation. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, pumping, but we had to set that at 881 because of the impacts. We went through the whole EAW process with West Vadnais Lake. So we had to set that as that outlet elevation. So I think what we're wondering is, how far above that, is there some, trigger elevation above that where we would pump down to that elevation again? Or are you thinking that this would be a continual system that always keeps
Well, and maybe to that point, you've talked to us a lot before about the connection to Grass Lake. And so what we're talking about is learning more about the impact downstream, but what would be the impact at some different levels to Grass Lake too? Because 881 is higher. Well,
higher
than Grass Lake. Would then Grass Lake would normally be, right?
Well, 881 is lower than either water bodies are right now.
Yeah, I'm not talking about right now.
Well, I don't know that so they equalize, right? And they go down together.
Yeah. But what you don't want is to set something so high that it's flowing back into Grass Lake, right?
Well, there are times in the past when that has happened.
Right.
Because I understand what you're saying. past, there have been long periods of time when grass has been a lot lower in 881, while West Vadnais has been up high. But maybe I'm not I understand what you're saying in terms of that, but in terms of the pumping level, there are times when West Vadnais has flowed that direction already.
I guess just to help us out a little bit, I can't just be asked what level do we want. Tell me what difference it makes at some different levels. And like I said, I could guess why 881 because I know that's where you set the outlet, but put it in there. And clearly if it was lower than that, you'd be dredging, water back. But where above that and why? What are the pros and cons of the different levels? That would help me. Then I think I could make a decision. Or at least have a good discussion about what the pros and cons are.
Yeah. Like what's the elevation of the culvert coming in under Rice Street?
Yeah, and where are you measuring now? You've got a new staff gauge in, right? Or no, I read in here you had the automatic ones in, right?
Yeah.
In Lake Vadnais? Where is it at? Is it in the pond area leading to the outlet, or is it more up by the grass outlet, which might be higher?
It's in the main body of the lake.
Of West Vadnais, yes.
Of West Vadnais, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But isn't the theory of lowering the outlet for West Vadnais the fact that we are trying to keep the lake at that level, basically?
Well, the hope would be that it would continue to drain down to that level during more moderate rainfall periods.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we have intense rainfall that brings it up, what we want to do operationally is bring it back down to a designated level as quickly as possible. That's why I thought 881 made sense, because theoretically what you're trying to do is manage the level of West Vadnais Lake, conserve in case we have a big event. And then we want to reset it again. And that's the purpose of the system we're talking about, so we can reset it faster and let it manage itself over a period of time. At least that's the way I look at it. It's a matter of speed. Because I remember when we were lowering this, Aaron made the point, okay, we're going to lower this and it'll take 3 or 4 years to get the water out. Well, it's not really a good thing. We need a way to get the water out faster.
Right. And so it seems like, and I'll throw this out there as something I've heard tonight, not only through this discussion, but the discussion we had on Twin Lake is, at least for the near term, any opportunistic pumping cannot raise flood levels downstream, or am I misunderstanding? I mean, regardless of when we would end up doing, that's a control point for us to work from, or is there a tolerance?
I don't understand.
If we use the same principle we did for Twin Lake, we can't tolerate any increase in flood levels in Lake Jarvis by pumping from anywhere upstream.
That's what I thought.
You don't want a variance.
Right.
So I'm just clarifying that, because those are the kinds of pieces I think we need as we enter into this additional information. And if we hold that steady, then we can start giving you different scenarios given 3 to 5 years of rainfall running the system. So that's an important point for us to have. And if it's different than that, it's fine with us. We'll evaluate it, but we need, that's what those questions we're trying to get at. Things like that. What are I call them control points. Maybe Aaron, you have a different terminology for that, but that helps us, because then we can design to something.
Well, I think the issue with me is that with Twin Lake or West Vadnais, if we've got that long period of time between discharge from that lake and when it gets to Jarvis, you can't adequately predict what the impacts of the discharge are with, normal summer rainfall events. I mean, 5 days out, you could have a 6-inch event coming up that you know nothing about. So it's dangerous to allow any discharge during the summertime, unless we'd have a Owasso bypass where the pipe gets it to Jarvis faster, and you can do some interim predictions.
Right.
Then that would be different. So I think all those different scenarios cause different opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Right. The original. Oh, I'm sorry, Larry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, but even having a system that could reset West Vadnais and Grass Lake during the wintertime would be a better benefit we have right now. Then the same thing with Twin Lakes, we can take a look at where things are, because as I understand the flood risk is that we're saying if we got the 100-year flood, it would give us this much water. And if we put more water in there at that point, it could go over the edge. But if it was way below that, and the 100-year flood wasn't going to cause flooding, either because of the changes we made with the Keller and the Phelan weirs, or because we had a long drought period, then we can use pumping.
Yep.
Yeah, the original feasibility study, the philosophy behind that was have downstream changes in place, or we can operate something in the off season, then there's not this concern about downstream impacts. So that piece was in the original feasibility study. And that, that may have been written kind of generally and not particularly clear. So that's fair. The questions about the opportunistic pumping and pumping not in the off season are what these questions are about. So should we look at options that would potentially increase downstream flooding, not in the situation where levels are below the outlet levels downstream? I think we all agree that that's an opportunity if that happens. But are there periods in the summertime that we should look at regardless of downstream? And also another question is are we talking about something that we would do right now immediately, or is this part of a longer term strategy? In which case the longer term strategy I think still wraps in with kind of what we had planned to approach the original feasibility study with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead.
It makes sense to me, Aaron, except not, as you said, the opportunistic pumping regardless of the downstream conditions. Those are the conditions that have to be factored in. And at the same time, we're talking about protecting downstream. We've got to realize we've had many years of built up water here. That's why people are pushing to get it out, because once it gets out and we can get West Vadnais down, there will be more flood storage potential there. We'll have, we've got to take care of the current situation and increased precipitation due to climate change, but we also have to figure out a way somehow to make up for the past buildup if we can do it safely. So that's the tricky balance piece.
Are we ready to move on?
I guess I would ask Aaron and Brad if they have everything they need or if they need any clarification on anything.
Are they still there?
Yeah, I'm thinking before I answer, and I'm hoping Aaron jumps in.
That's good.
So, really.
Aaron, do you have anything that you need yet from?
I think we're good. I mean, I think I have what I need. I mean, what I'm hearing is we'll do this feasibility study and we'll flex it in any way that gets at the intent that we talked about today, is what are our options in getting water out of West Vadnais and Grass that do not increase downstream flood levels, but that allow a way to get more water out faster. So that's what I heard, and that can include pumping or piping. It can include off-season or not, but that the boundary conditions, which is the main thing I wanted to hear from the group, was the boundary conditions are no change to water levels downstream. That's the biggest one I needed to understand. Otherwise, I think I understand what people are saying. Anything else anyone wants to?
No,
Yeah,
Aaron, I
good
think
with
you
that.
captured it.
just for clarification, is it no change in levels downstream or no change in the flood levels downstream?
Flood levels.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
that's what I thought too. Okay. And one other question too, is that you have two options in here. Is that what you're going to be doing, is looking at both of those and giving us some advice on which one makes the most sense to get this?
Yeah, I think
We already have the red line. The red line already exists.
yeah, the difference would be, that's right, we have the red line. The difference would be leveraging that when the levels in that triangle area are below 884, because right now that's an overflow pathway, but one of the options would be to leverage that pathway to bring the triangle wetland area down below 884.
As Bruce noted, however, is there a way, this is predicated, as I read it, on 4 CFS, which is kind of where it is right now. Is there a way to increase that using that same pathway to make it even more efficient?
So that pathway would allow a higher flow rate potentially, the red pathway. I'm sorry, the yellow pathway would allow a higher flow rate. The question is whether or not MnDOT would let us do that under these conditions. That's something we can find out as a part of this study. The red pathway is sort of bounded just by the nature of that existing pipe. That would be leveraging that existing pathway.
Right.
But we can also look at bigger pipes, and that's what's written into the feasibility study as well, looking forward as a bigger project.
If we're going to do bigger pipes, that's a good question. If we're going to do bigger pipes, is the idea behind that to replace the 15 pipe with a bigger pipe? Is that what you're saying? Or to punch another?
Yeah.
94?
Yeah, sorry, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think I understood. Yeah, so that's where we start to look at these bigger picture systemic changes that involve the Owasso Basin bypass and the Keller-Phelan control system. So that would be, right, that would be changing that outlet to be something much bigger, which is it's a much bigger effort, but that's what we would be looking at. What would it take to do that? How big would it be? What would it cost? Under what conditions would it be operated? That's the intent of that study. So what we're talking about tonight is adding a little bit of nuance here that would also look at some pumping options.
Okay. Just out of curiosity's sake, as long as it's popped into my head, if we do something like that, will it get closer to what ditch 16 used to do?
Would it get closer to what originally?
Yeah, ditch 16 before they put 694 in, and we had ditch 6, all the water flowed down there. Is it closer to mimicking that?
I don't think so, because the hydrologic conditions in the whole watershed were so different that you couldn't compare. It's like apples and oranges.
Okay.
It flowed without 694 there, but with 694 there, it changed everything.
Right. Okay. All
right. Are we ready to move on now to the next item?
Yeah, if there's
Brad,
no more.
you look like you're satisfied.
I think
Aaron
so.
said-
I guess before we make that final jump away from this, one question had come up, and this is through Bruce's comments. We had suggested, I think, 3 years of rainfall data, actual rainfall data running through. Adding a couple more years, it does take more than just expanding that. It takes more modeling time to make sure the model handles it, and then analyzing the output, and it's more time. So if you think that helps give you a better picture for decision making, we're willing to do that, but it is additional time. Or if you think less information on that standpoint could give you that picture, that's what we've laid out, but we're willing to give you as much information through modeling and data and technical expertise that we need to help you make a decision. We just don't want to overdo it either.
Just to address that, Brad, if I may, is that that's also more money spent on something that's not anything you can touch or feel or see. It's 2 more years of data that may or may not give us anything, correct?
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, let me
That's okay.
comment on that, because for me, 2014 and 2019 are actually 2 of the more important years. In 2014 is where we started to have issues that seem to be affecting the area. So it happened in the second half of the rainy season. So for 2014, we have, before we had problems and during we had problems. Then in 2015, 16, 17, and 18, we had high rain levels, but in 2020, we had extraordinary rain levels. So those 2 endpoints to me are about as important as the stuff in the middle, because they represent, in some ways, they represent outliers, but we ought to be knowing what the outliers are doing as well when we're trying to make decisions and understand what's going on with these.
So again, I want to just clarify, and Aaron, you can help me with this. The rainfall that we're using, granted it's historic rainfall, but it's less to look at what would have happened back there, but rather looking forward to use rainfall as it has happened in the past that we're familiar with, so we can give you a picture of what the future might hold. So we won't be looking back and analyzing the system how it would have been, because this helps us to see, it helps us to illustrate to all of you what benefits there may or may not be in doing pumping. Is that, Aaron, would you say it a different way, or is that accurate?
No, I think that's right. It's about asking the question, if we were to put this pipe in or pump in this way, and we got precipitation just like 2014 through 2019, what would happen? It's not so much as saying, would we have headed off XYZ, because we've changed in the watershed.
Yeah, and that's true, and I understand that. That's not my point. My point is sort of, when you're trying to use the rainfall from any specific year, it all depends on exactly what day and how that rainfall fell. And I think the more information you have to be able to look at that, I mean, your alternative is to try to look at averages on a daily basis, and that's kind of silly too, because there never is an average. So I would feel more comfortable having more years, even though I understand it's going to cost more money, but to particularly take a look at those years which turned out to be outliers and say, what would happen if we have these systems in place and we have a year like that? That's kind of what we did when we were looking at the short-term pumping benefits, if you will, back in March. Saying, okay, look, if 2019, if 2020 is like 2019, here's what would happen. Well, then what about, 2015 or 2016 or 2014? So in order to get a picture, if we only take 4 years, we only have a picture of those 4 years. I understand you could take 50 years and you'd probably have a better picture of it. But I think with those 2 bookends, particularly 2014 and 2019, they would give us the kind of information base that we really need to start making these decisions.
Okay, are we ready to move on now?
We're ready, Marge.
Okay. Tina, what's our next starred category?
Well, the other starred item was the Target Store retrofit projects, and I starred this because there was some information included in here that was requested by by Manager Swope in particular, but after a discussion at a board meeting. about ranges of cost per pound of phosphorus. And I also want you to be aware that there was an update in the design for this particular target store that did change the cost per pound for that particular project as well. So that is for your information, but we're here to answer any questions if you have any questions about that.
Okay, and who was the question from again?
Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
And thank you for the chart. It was very instructive. One thing, and in order to get this chart, you had to have a list of projects.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to keep asking questions, but if you could send me that list of projects, because one of the things I want to do is go back and look at those so I can better understand how the decisions have been made in the past. It is interesting that it goes all the way from, you know, $1,000 up to $77,000 per pound. That must have been, I'm kind of curious as to what that project was. And so if you have that data, I would like to have that to just take a look at it to help me understand this a little bit better.
Sure. Yep, we can share that with you.
What is and as I understand it now, originally this was sort of like Motel 6 and Target, and then Motel 6 dropped out. And now one of the Target things has dropped out, so we're left with one Target. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, can I jump in there, Aaron?
Yeah,
sorry.
please.
So, yeah, so Motel 6 didn't drop out. We're still looking at it. It just might be a little bit outside of, we may need to pull in some city assistance. It might be outside of our full scope for this project. It's a little bigger than we first had hoped. So we're still working with them and looking at possibilities. And then with the Target stores, the North St. Paul store has some soil contamination, and it just with all the just planning and back and forth with Target, it wasn't possible to do the further investigation on that site and work with East St. Paul and get both stores going this year. So we decided to focus on East St. Paul, and then we'll go forward with soil borings and everything so that we can keep planning the North St. Paul for next year.
And what is the cost per pound for phosphorus removal now? Is it $14,000?
Yeah, we're,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, Erin.
Oh, for the East St. Paul, yeah, it's 14,000. Yeah, I'm looking at the write-up right now. Yep. That's down a little bit from the last round, not a lot, but it's down a little bit. Again, that's because of the type of site that it is. Highly impervious, no green space to leverage.
Thank you for the list, the bar chart. It was really helpful. If I could get a list of what those projects were, not the ones that are lower than, because I know there are a lot of projects there. I'm looking at the value ones more so I can understand what's been done in the past. And I would thank you.
Sure. Yep.
Any other comments on Target?
Do you need a motion to move ahead with this, or are we just moving ahead?
No, these are discussion items.
Okay.
Well, we can though. I think that's a good idea, Cliff. Let's do it.
Oh, what do we need? Tina, do we
A
need
motion
one?
to move ahead.
I mean, if you're supportive of us, we have the budget and we had planned to do one Target store.
Okay.
We don't necessarily need a motion, but if you're supportive of us continuing on that project path, then.
No, I think it's good to do a motion. Cliff, would you like to make a motion?
I'll move we endorse moving ahead with the East St. Paul Target store project.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Pam.
Okay, Pam, thank you. Discussion? All in favor? I'll go first. Yes. Cliff?
Yes.
Pam? Okay, Larry?
Yes.
Pam? I got Pam. Larry?
Yep, Pam and Larry.
Diane?
Yeses.
Diane?
You're muted.
Unmute.
Yes, sorry.
There we go. Motion carries. Okay, do we have any left Tina?
Yes, we have one more that I had starred. That's the West Vadnais Lake outlet lowering, and we do have a good update that Erin can give you.
We finally
Well.
heard from MnDOT today that they are recommending approval of the permit. So that's very, very good news. That's just the good news.
Yeah, we had some
That's
delays.
great.
Finally.
COVID-related delays in reviewing permits, and a lot of insisting from Erin to give us a response, and we do. So we have that permit, and Fitzgerald is letting them know that they can work that into their schedule.
Okay, great. Thank you, Erin. You're just as wonderful as Brad.
Larry has his hand up too.
Yeah, I have two questions. And one is, what is the gate that is on the west?
I can't hear you.
Just west of the A6 inlet. There's a thing with slats going up and down that's across the inlet. What is it?
I think that's our cart barrier, maybe.
Well, we have a cart.
Is that in the channel, Larry?
Yeah.
It's in the channel. Yep, that's our PVC cart barrier. And originally, what's that?
I'm talking about up where A6 is, right at the end of the thing. That's a cart barrier, because we have one downstream too.
Right. So that was installed right after we kind of hit the glitch with the electric barrier, which was originally planned to be installed in there.
Okay.
And that got delayed because of COVID. So we went with the PVC barrier, and the advantage with putting the barrier there is that we have about 100 tag carp in West Vadnais, and they tend to run in that channel. So that creates a really good opportunity to capture those fish when they're migrating during spawning.
Okay.
So putting that barrier there is a really nice tool to have to be able to catch carp in that system and look at how many fish we capture that are tagged in order to get a really solid population estimate for West Vadnais.
Does it impede flow out of there?
To a small degree. So we've been closely monitoring that. It looks like it's bumping the elevation about 1/10 of an inch, and we're cleaning that barrier every day. So we're not getting buildup, and we're not seeing any sort of significant increase in water level because of that barrier. And it's acting very similarly to other barriers that we have in the Owasso chain. And there's nothing out of the ordinary in how it's behaving or how it's trapping material. It's very typical.
So the long-term plan, as I read this then, is to replace that eventually with an electronic?
Correct. Yep. So the channel be dredged. We're probably going to go ahead and put in the PVC barrier after the dredging of the channel. And later in the summer, hopefully, when things kind of loosen up, we'll be able to get the electric barrier in at that time. So it'll be set for next spring, for next year's migration.
Are we going to take out the downstream carp barrier then?
Yes, we'll be taking that out as well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Tina, how are we doing?
I didn't have anything else starred, and I don't have anything else on the agenda, but other than if anybody has any other questions or report of managers.
Okay, let's just quickly go around the room
Yeah.
for managers' comments, and then hopefully we'll adjourn. So Larry.
I have nothing.
No Larry?
No.
Okay, Cliff.
No comments.
Diane.
Two things. One, I like the work you all did on the agenda. I think that worked really well. So thank you for that. And then on the project and program status reports, I was just wondering what the timing is for number 9, the Keller and Phelan modifications.
So
and you're asking Tina?
Well, yeah, and Brad, that's the, we talked about that earlier, how that design will be worked through the summer. And then I can't remember what you said after that now, Brad. What was the
Right.
December.
We're in the design process right now. We're working with other vendors that will help us determine what are the right gate systems given fitting them into the existing structures as opposed to rebuilding the entire structure. So that's what will be the challenge, to be able to pass the amount of flow we need to and put in a gate system in not only the Keller channel weir structure that we looked at a couple of years ago on a tour, and then both of the Phelan outlet structures too, getting more water through those in these opportune times. So that design effort will go through August, I would say. Towards the end of August, we would be done with that, and we would be entering into the permitting process. And then depending on how the initial part of the permitting process goes, we can start to talk about the bidding process of that. But we would want to have we wouldn't necessarily want to have permits in place or need to have permits in place to go out for bids. We would want good feedback from the regulators, like we're on the right track and we just have subtle changes to make. Otherwise, we could have to redo the bidding process because of changes in the design. So the schedule is really driven a lot by the permitting process, but the design effort will go through the summer.
Thanks.
Yep.
And Pam.
I'm good, thanks.
All right, I have just one thing. And I just want to thank this group. It's a great group to work with. And this meeting went so much better than I thought it would. And we're going to try and do the same thing again for the next meeting with the consent agenda up front. And we're almost close to 2 hours, which Tina and I wanted to keep it to. So thanks to all of you for volunteering your time to work with this group.
I agree. It was a good meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Somebody adjourn, Cliff?
I'll move adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
We don't need it, but.
Yeah, Larry seconded.
Okay.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.
Good
Thank
seeing
you.
you.
Good night.
Bye, take care.
Good round.
Bye-bye, good night.
Thanks to our visitors too for coming.